Hi, everybody. My name is Paul, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm very grateful to be here tonight. I want to thank the gentleman who asked me to come and speak. I think his name is Steve, but he couldn't make it tonight. You know what I mean? I think somebody said he's down at the powwow, so we'll forgive him, you know. I want to thank my friend Jim for driving me up here tonight. It's a long ride, man. I don't know. I live out in Woodland Hills in the San Fernando Valley, you know. It's not at the end of the world, but you could see it from there, you know what I mean? But it's good to be here tonight, you know. Today's 82nd birthday, June 10th, 1935. So we ought to... Yeah, right. Wasn't for those two drunks, this room would be empty, you know. And so I'm eternally grateful, you know what I mean, that... let me take you back to where... Come on in, you can come in, yeah. To where it all began for me. I was born and raised on the East Coast. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I know you think I talk funny now, but you should have heard me 50 years ago when I came here, you know? Yeah, that's right, he knows. Yeah, right. Anyway, as a young man, you know, I always had those feelings of inadequacy, and, you know, I never knew what to do with them or how to treat them, and so... You know, at an early age, around the age of about 13 years old, and I started sticking needles in my arm, you know, and I don't know, I thought somehow that was an answer, you know, and I lived like that for a long time out there, you know. I spent about 7-8 years, you know what I mean, going in and out of hospitals, you know. First time I put a needle in my arm was 1957, you know, and some of you kids weren't even born then, you know, and, you know, but anyway, 1961 was the first time I went away to try to get off all the crap that I had been on, you know, and I was like 17 years old, you know, and show you what a tough guy I thought I was. I had to have Ethel, who was my mother, you know, bring me to this place on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, a place called Manhattan General. And I'd spent some time in there and came out, and, you know, like a lot of us who sit here tonight, you know, it's going to be different, you know what I mean? We're going to make it different. The only problem is that we don't know how to go from point A to point B. At least that was my experience, you know what I'm saying? I didn't even know that I had a problem with alcohol or drugs or any of that. I didn't think that was a problem. You know, for me, I thought it was a good thing, because without it, I could never communicate, you know, with anybody, you know what I mean? Because I had very, very little education. I got a 6th grade education, you know, and then I was asked to leave school. You know, they threw me out of school. Then I went to a continuation school, you know, what they call a 600 school back in those days, you know, and you know, they lock you up in the morning, and then at the end of the day, they give you a token, and they say, all right, you know, catch the subway and go on home. And that's the way it was for a couple of years. You know, I had a brother that was a couple of years older than I am, and he used to hang out in the pool room all the time, and I would go up there, and his name was Jerry, and I'd always ask him for a couple of bucks, because Lord knows I needed a couple of bucks, you know. I always needed money, you know, and, you know, he gave me some money, and I was under the influence of those barbiturates, and I don't have to tell anybody here what those are, you know. Those are idiot pills, you know what I mean? Because when you take them, you do stupid things, you know? And I was always doing stupid things. And as I, you know, asked my brother for some money, he gave it to me. And then as I began to walk out of the pool room, I tried to shake some guy down, you know, for some money. And, you know, in the neighborhood I came from, you know what I mean? They would just throw a right hand. And, you know, the guy knocked me down all these steps. They're all ceramic steps. Thank God for the idiot pills, you know? Because I just kind of got up, dusted myself off, you know what I mean, and walked and went about my business. And, you know, I'd like to tell you that I live like that once in a while, you know. I live like that every day of my life, pretty much, as a younger man, you know. Because there was always beer parties in my neighborhood where I grew up. I grew up kind of in a rural area of Brooklyn. You know, a lot of it was undeveloped. You know, there was a lot of horses and wagons. And I know people look at you, they think you're crazy. What are you talking about, horses and wagons? What the hell are you living with, the Indians or something? You know? No, there were no Indians in my neighborhood, but you would think there might have been, you know? Anyway, you know, this friend of mine, his father owned a lot of horses, and they had all these milk wagons. And anyway, when we were kids, we used to go out, you know, junking, you know? And everything that wasn't nailed down, we just thought it was ours, you know? And so we picked it up, and there was a lot of junkyards around where I lived as a kid. And so we'd go in there and steal what we could, you know. And then we'd get the wagon the next day, and we'd pick up all the stuff we stole, and we'd drive it right back into the place we stole it from, you know. I know nobody here ever did that, though, you know what I mean, because... but that's the way I lived as a kid, you know what I mean. Everything was open game, and, you know... when I started using, I started going away all the time, and I couldn't figure out, how come I can't stay on the streets like other people, you know? As I got a little bit older, things got worse. I seem to be going in and out of hospitals, always trying to get a handle on something that I don't even know I have. You know, I don't know that I suffer from a disease called alcoholism. I don't know anything about that, and I wouldn't come to know that until many years later, you know? And, but everybody was out there, was always trying to help me. You know, they took me to, you name it, they took me, you know what I mean? In 1966, I guess it was February 19th, 1966, I come out here to California. But prior to coming out here, I want to tell you a few things, because it seems like I got plenty of time, you know, so there's no rush, and I don't need to rush this story. Anyway, you know, as a kid, like I said, I had a lot of trouble. There's no question about it. And as I started to get a little bit older, the trouble seemed to get worse. And I met a gal, she got pregnant, and you know, I was to have 2 kids born to me. They were almost as old as I am, for Christ's sakes, you know. One of them's 55, the other one's 54, you know. And then I got a couple of young ones, you know, and I mean 43 and 37, you know. That's from a different wife, you know. You know how we are. We move around a little bit, you know what I mean? We don't want to subject anybody to, you know. So anyway, what happened was, you know, these kids were born, you know, and I'm working every day. You know, there was a guy that lived next door to me. His name was Barton, you know. He just come out of the Korean War in 53. And in 57, I went to work for this guy, you know, as his helper. You know, just schlepping his tools around and, you know, learning how to do floors, actually. And he was a good craftsman. And he taught me well. And when I was about 15 years old, he called me up and said, "Paul, would you like to come and do a day's work for me?" I said, "Sure, Bart, I'd love to, but I got to have some money up front." He said, "How much you need?" I said, $30. "No problem. Come and get the 30. I went and got the 30. I went to a doctor, got a prescription for 30 3-grain Tunals. Yeah, right. You should have been there that day, you know. I was in a house in Queens, and I was in the basement. And in those days, we were putting down a lot of asphalt tile and vinyl asbestos tile. And you had to spread this black mastic all over the floor. And what happened was those pills took effect. And the next thing I knew, I was crawling. You know, in this house, it was downstairs, and they had like a couple of steps, then a landing, then another couple of steps, then the basement. And I was working in the basement. And when the pills took effect, I didn't realize that I was covered with that mastic from head to toe. And I started crawling, you know, on all 4 up the steps out of that woman's house. And, you know, I'm thoroughly convinced, you know, that God looks out for drunks and fools, you know, and I seem to fit into both categories, you know. And that day, I don't know what happened. I made it back to this man's place of business, you know. And he was with a client, and he took one look at me, and he just stopped what he was doing. He just couldn't believe what he'd seen, you know. I was covered with this stuff, and, you know, Bart was a big guy, and, you know, he came over and he picked me up like a little kid, put me in his car, brought me back to Ethel's house, you know, and just brought me upstairs, and, you know, they tell me this, I don't know, you know. The next morning I woke up and there they were, you know. Maybe some of the people in your family, you know, whether it be your wife or your kids or your husband or your, you know, they look at you, you know. say things like, what the hell are you going to do with yourself, Paul? You know? I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, you know? What you want to tell them is go away. Leave me alone. Don't bother me. If I knew what to do, I would do it, you know? What are you bugging me about questions like that? What am I going to do with myself? Anyway, the long and the short of it, I continued to live like that for a couple of more years. You know, towards the end of my drinking and using, one day I was at Ethel's house, and I guess I wasn't acting appropriate, and they called the cops, and the cops came, they locked me up, and take me to this place called Pilgrim State Hospital. No, first they took me to Kings County State, you know. Then they kept me there for, I don't know. It's only supposed to keep you for a couple of days, you know. It seemed like I was there for a week, you know. And I went down and see the head psychiatrist. You know, they start asking you questions. You know, they're big on questions, you know. I'm not big on answers, though, you know. So the guy started asking me things like, you know, start talking about my mother, you know. So I start talking about his mother, you know. They really don't like that. They don't like that at all, you know. So they send you back up to your room, and they tell the nurses, they start writing prescriptions for Thorazine and this crap and that crap, and before you know it, they put you in front of a window, and you might stay there for a day or two, you know. And I was in there, like I said, about a week and a half, and they didn't think I was well enough to go back on the streets of Brooklyn, you know. So they came up and they talked to me, and they said, Paul, we're going to send you to a hospital, you know. I said, oh, okay, no problem, you know. They sent me to this hospital called Pilgrim State Hospital. Population, it's out in Long Island, you know. Population then, when I went there as a kid, was about 18,000. Now I'm one of 18,000, you know. And I get in there, there's guys in there, they've been there 30 years, 35 years. And they're busting the salt shakers on the table, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy, man. How the hell did I get from the streets of Brooklyn to this, you know, joint that I'm in? And you talk about needing a drink. Oh, man, did I need a drink badly, you know. I thought if anything happens to that woman, Ethel, who's my mother, I'm going to be in here for the rest of my life, you know. I'm never going to get out of this joint. Well, they kept me there longer than they should have, you know, and after about 4 months, you know, they let me back on the streets, and I like to tell you everything was fine, you know. And you know, if everything was fine, I wouldn't be here tonight, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, if you guys drank and used the way I did, you know, that's why we're all here, you know, because it stopped working, you know. But I go back on the streets, and it's all going to be different, you know, this time it's going to be different. But I don't know how I'm going to make it different. Like I said, I don't know how I'm going to get from point A to point B. And long and the short of it, you know, I'm in a lot of trouble. Things are not going well. You know, I'm in a lot of trouble. And, you know, I talk to some people, and they tell me about a place out here in California down on the beach, a place called Synanon, you know. And I didn't know much about Synanon, and they said, you know, it's people like you, Paul, people who have problems with, you know, alcohol, and people who have problems with drugs. And so anyway, February 19th, 1966, they put me on a plane, and they sent me out here to California. And I wound up down in this place called Synanon. And, you know, it was a good place, you know, it was okay. I mean, it got a little crazy in later years, but, you know, it was good while I lived there. And, you know, very simply what happened, I lived there for about 3 years. I met a gal. She used to come down and play the Synanon game. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to make my move, you know. And so I left. I went to Las Vegas. I married this lady, you know, and we started out on this rip-roaring relationship. You know, I'd known her for 30 years. I was married to her for 28 years. And, you know, things started happening. You know, I got a job. You know, I went down, I got a job, and as I was taking this test down at the Union Hall, there was a guy there from Brooklyn. And we started talking, and I didn't know him, but I knew the guy that he worked for, you know, as a kid. And he said to me, listen, Paul, why don't you come down to this place where I work? He said, I think I can get you a job. I said, all right, great. So I went down there, you know, they hired me, and I started doing all kinds of stuff, you know. back then. And I worked for this guy for a couple of years, and everything was going okay. This lady that I married, now she'd never seen me loaded. She'd never seen me, under the influence of anything. And, little by little, some of these friends of mine, they started coming out of Synanon. And we started to get together, on weekends, Friday night, Saturday night. And we started going to the gin mills, in the area where I lived. And, we started drinking, having good times, it was a lot of fun. I wasn't sticking needles in my arms. By now, I was putting it up my nose, because that's what was going on back in those days, And we sit in the bars and we drink, and it was all fun and good times, and I never thought anything of it. And then I'd make that phone call, to the house and tell her, listen, I'll be home in an hour. And then it was 2, then it was 3, and, and then whenever I got home, I got there, and I'd stand there banging on the door, and one time I showed up, she had my suitcase in front of the house with a little note. Paul, take this suitcase, and leave. Leave? What are you talking about? It's my house, you know what I mean? Now, she happened to have her aunt, there living with her at the time from Chicago. And her aunt stood about this big. But she had a mouth on her that was this goddamn big, She said, I don't think you ought to throw him out. Look at him, he looks like he's going to die. I said, oh, gee, thanks, aunt. You know what I mean? That's nice of you, Anyway, she let me back in the house, and, I went through that, circle many, many times, let me back in, everything's going to be all right. Nothing was all right, 1973, I made an attempt at Alcoholics Anonymous. Came here for all the wrong reasons. I came here to tell you how much I had and what I had, and you said, it's all right, kid, keep coming back, And so I did. I stuck around for about 6 months. And once again, things got a little better because I wasn't drinking. Work picked up a little bit. Once again, I had bedroom privileges. I thought, Jesus, man, who needs AA? This is good stuff, So after 6 months, I left. And a friend of mine came out from back east, and he was very heavily involved in a lot of bad stuff. And I'll just tell you one story about that. I was working on a building in Beverly Hills, and I was doing the whole building, all the floors in the building. And I wound up putting the whole building in my nose. And I don't tell you that to be cute. I don't tell you that to be funny. I tell you that because that's the truth. And that's the way it was, And, I called the guy in my home group, First time I came to AA, 1973, I was 28 years old. And I thought, no, man, I'm not an alcoholic, I might be a lot of things, but I'm not alcoholic. And very simply what happened, when I came back, in July of 1976, there was a big guy in my home group, by the name of Keith. Keith Carpenter, he's dead now, so I'll tell you his name, And he was a big guy. He played football for the 49ers, and Keith was really a big guy, and so he always intimidated me a little bit, He was the kind of guy that'd come up, he'd grab you around, he'd give you a big kiss on the forehead. I said, Keith, man, you can't do that, man. You don't understand. From where I come from, man, you can't be doing that. It went in one ear and out the other. He never cared. He'd come up, he'd give you a big hug and a kiss, tell you he loved you. Keith became my first sponsor, And Keith said, Paul, listen, you got to do a few things around here, I said, yeah, what do I got to do? He said, well, just do what we do. I said, well, what do you do? He said, So I said, okay. He said, listen, meet me on such and such night over at Ohio Street. We're going to go up to Bakersfield and we're going to put on a meeting, I said, oh, okay. And, I showed up and I had a pair of flip-flops on and I had a T-shirt on. And when he looked at me, he really was going to leave me on the corner, But he said to me, listen, I'm going to tell you something, And then he told me what he had to tell me. And I got in the car, and because I was the skinniest and the smallest, I must have weighed about 80 pounds, 90 pounds soaking wet when I got here. There was 5 of us in the car, And there was a guy by the Milt D was sitting to my right. This guy, Cy G, was sitting to my left. I was in the middle on the hump in the back of that car. You guys are laughing because you've been there, yeah. And then there was a guy sitting in the front, a guy by the name of Marv R, you know, and Keith was driving. And I said, Keith, where we going? Don't worry about it, you know. We'll be there in an hour. I said, oh, okay, great. And we're driving up through the Grapevine, you know, and I see all this tumbleweed, you know, going across the highway. I said, what's that? You know, he said, it's just tumbleweed. I said, really? You don't have that in Brooklyn, man. You know, they don't have tumbleweed, you know, going across the highway, you know. And we get up there, everybody's talking in the car, nobody's listening, you know what I mean? It's, you know, a typical AA meeting, you know, on the way up to the goddamn meeting, you know. And then if I was lucky, you know, we get up there and I get to read chapter 5, you know. Then we get back in the car and it starts all over again, you know. And take me back to Ohio Street, drops me off. He said, all right, kid, I'll see you tomorrow night, you know. And, you know, I look back on those days now because, you know, I'm coming up on a birthday, you know, and I just, I get to thinking about those guys, and most of them are still around, you know, they're still alive. One guy's up in Washington. You know, this guy, Cy G, he was a bank robber, you know. He's out of prison, you know, and I assume he's around somewhere. You know, Marv's still around. He's pretty sick now. He's 82 years old. I was with him last night at the men's stag, and he sits to the left of me, you know, and he's still around, and I'm grateful he's still around. You know, Keith died, and, you know, Milt D, you know, he's got a lot of physical problems, you know, like we do when we get older. And I certainly have had my share, but, you know, I think about these guys, and they were great people, man. They were really great people, you know. I was going through a lot of stuff with my ex, and, you know, I was going through this divorce. You know, I was about, I don't know, 21 years sober. I think I was 51 years old. And my sponsor said to me, Paul, listen, I think this weekend there's a retreat that a friend of mine was putting on, a guy by the name of Clint Hodges. He's dead now, so I'd tell you his name. He said, but I think you ought to go on it. He said, I think it'd be good for you. So I said, okay, and I went on it. And, you know, it was all about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there was a guy there by the name of Leonard C. And I asked Leonard, would he take me back through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he said that he would, because, you know, I had done some work in the book, but it wasn't that much, you know. And by this time I was so full of anger and rage, and, you know, I was pissed off at everybody, at her especially, at Alcoholics Anonymous. And Leonard said, yeah, Paul, he said, I'd be happy to take you back through the book of AA. And, you know, this guy lived in Eagle Rock, he lived. And I lived at the other end of the valley. I'm in Woodland Hills. And so every Friday night, I would drive down there, and he'd come home from work at about 5 o'clock, and then we'd sit and we'd spend about 2 hours, and he'd take me back to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when he felt I had to do something, you know, like make amends, you know, I did it, you know. It wasn't easy, but I did it, you know. And I started doing things, like to that ex, you know. I called her up and said, listen, I'd like to come and see you. And she said to me at that time, well, you know, you're close enough to me right now. She said, I don't think you need to get any closer, you know. And that was on the phone, so, you know, that was the best I could do at that time, you know. And then, you know, I had these 2 kids born to me, you know what I mean. The youngest is 37, you know, the other one is 43, and one's a girl, you know, one's my son. And, you know, I got a hold of them and I said to them, listen, you know, I may be divorcing your mother, but you kids are always going to be a part of my life, you know. And from that day to this day, they have been, you know. And the reason they are only because of Alcoholics Anonymous. No other reason, you know. You know, that ex of mine now, when we have parties, we invite her, you know. And, you know, it's funny, when I was married to her, I always try to get her to go to Al-Anon. And I don't know, man, when I left her, she jumped out of that bed, you know, and started going to Al-Anon, and things got better for her, you know, and she started to, I guess, you know, see her part, you know, in this marriage. And, you know, and today we're friends. You know, today we're friends. And, you know, my wife and I today, we have 7 grandkids, you know, between the two of us. And, you know, life's pretty good. But I'm going to tell you something. It took a long time, you know. It took a long time. That was about 21 years ago, you know, when I divorced that lady. And, you know, but I just never stopped going to Alcoholics Anonymous. People say, Paul, will you come here and do this? Sure, you know. Would you come here and speak for us? Sure, you know. My time is your time, you know what I mean? I don't think of it as anything else, you know. And my life is pretty good today. What happened very simply for me, there was a guy in my home group, you know. I'm in the flooring business, like I told you. This guy, Jim M., he used to give that test, you know, to become a contractor in the state of California. And Jimmy said to me, listen, Paul, don't worry about it. He said, I know you have very little education, but you got about 18 years, you know, at that time in the trade. And he said, you know, on nights we weren't going to meetings, you come out to my place out in the valley. I had a little condo, you know, and we'd sit and, you know, we'd study. And he said, Paul, all you got to do is, the questions are yes and no. That's all you have to know. So I said, okay, great. After 2 weeks, he thought I knew something. I said, okay, great. So I went down, I took the test, you know. About 3 weeks later, they sent me a contractor's license, you know. This was back in the 80s, you know what I mean? When you could put a stick in the ground and you could sell it, you know. And, you know, all of a sudden I had all this work, you know what I mean? I had, you know, I had 8, 10 men working for me. I had trucks. I had warehouses. I mean, I had all this going on. And, you know, I can't write a contract, you know. But I know where to find somebody who could write the contract, you know. And people started putting a lot of money in my hands, you know, and they expected me to come back and do the work. And because of you good people, you know, I started to do just that, you know. And I made a ton of money. I made more money than I could ever dream of, you know. And then I bought the big house on the hill, you know, and, you know, I had all these cars and, you know, Mercedes and Cadillacs and, you know, everything I needed and wanted, and then some. And, you know, when I went through this divorce, you know, God's got a hell of a sense of humor, you know. Shit, he gave it all to the bitch, you know what I mean? He just took it from me and gave it to her, you know. And then I'd get on the phone and I'd say, Byron, you don't understand what just happened, you know. And I would tell him. And then he'd hang up the phone on me. He'd say, Paul, give it to her. And then the phone would go dead, you know. I said, oh, he probably didn't hear what I said, you know. So I get back on the horn, I dial him up again. I said, Byron, did you just hear what I told you? And he said the same thing. He said, Paul, give it to her. And the phone would go dead. I might be slow, but I'm not stupid, you know. So I said, all right, you know. So I gave it to her, you know. I mean, I gave her the house and, you know, gave her the cars, and, you know, gave her all the stuff, you know, the stuff. Because, see, I always thought the stuff was really important to me, because if you grow up like I grow up in the streets of Brooklyn, and you come from nothing, okay, and you don't have any money, and then all of a sudden you acquire all this stuff, you know, I had more stuff than I knew what to do with, you know, and then all of a sudden I lost all the stuff, you know, and I gave it to her, you know, and I look back on that today, you know, and I tell you something. I'm very, very grateful to my sponsors back then, because they always gave me the right information. When they said things like, give it to her, then I'll give it to her, you know. Because today, you know, my wife and I, we've been together 20 years, you know, 21 years, and we have everything we need. I got everything I need, you know. I got a car to drive, you know, I got a couple of bucks in my pocket. I got a little house out there in Woodland Hills, you know. I got these grandkids that I get to see, you know. I got a lot of stuff, you know what I mean? And only because I went back through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, and I got my priorities, you know, in order, you know, and I made amends to those that I needed to make amends to. And I don't have to hide anything anymore. My life is an open book, you know. I owed that lady a lot of money. And I don't know, there was something about me. I didn't want to give it to her, you know, like the rest of us, you know. I owed her about $18,000. And what happened was she sent the cops, you know, to my house. I was living up in Topanga Canyon. And, you know, the cops come banging on my door, you know, about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'd say, yeah, what's up? What do you guys want, you know? Well, if you don't come up with this $4,000, we're going to take your car, you know? And so I thought, geez, you're going to take my car, you know? I said, all right. So I made a few phone calls. I called a couple of guys, and you know, I sponsored this guy for almost 37 years. I called him up. I said, listen, Danny, I need some money. He said, how much you need? I said, okay. But listen, I said, you got to bring it to me within 30 minutes. Because if you don't get it here in 30 minutes, my car is going to disappear. And they had the tow truck, you know, there ready to take it. He came, you know, I gave the money. And then I had to go to court. And, you know, I wound up giving her the money. And then I owed her. I gave her the $18,000 that I owed her, and then I gave her another $12,000, you know. I gave her $30,000, and I kind of bored her out of my life for the rest of my life, you know. And I tell you something, her and I are good friends today, you know. I don't have any anger to her anymore. I don't have any resentments. And why is that? Why is that? I tell you why that is, you know, because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I got a chance to do the work in the book. And that's the reason that I live pretty much, you know, a comfortable life, you know. I can't work anymore, you know. I used to be able to get out there and, you know, do some stuff with my men and, you know, and then I got all kinds of physical stuff going on. 25 years ago, I had open heart surgery. They rearranged 4 of my arteries. Last year, you know what I mean, they opened my heart up again. They put a valve in it, you know. And I'm great today. I mean, I feel good. I'm in good shape. I just can't physically work anymore. And so I'm always trying to do things around the house. And then now I just get on the phone and I call a couple of my guys. I say, you know, come by the house because they're carpenters, you know. Like Monday, I got to build a new fence. I'm not going to build it, you know. They're going to build it, you know. But that's okay, you know what I mean? It's okay. You know, I know people that could build it, just like I knew people that could write the contract, you know, for me and send it out, you know. And because people put money in my hands, I went back out there and I did the work and I established a good name, you know. And people say, oh, yeah, that poor guy, Paul, yeah, you can give him the money. Don't worry about him. He's a good guy, you know. He'll do what he said he was going to do. And why is that? Why is that? As a young guy, people put money in my hands. I ran like a thief because that's what I was, you know. And I don't have to live that way, and I haven't had to live that way in many, many years. And it's all because of, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous. And so, you know, you know, my son's 37. I got a daughter that's 43. She's, you know, these kids studied the martial arts, and, you know, I used to go watch them, and they're great kids today. You know, my daughter's an attorney. You know, my little guy, you know, he's a computer whiz. You know, they started their own company, and, you know, he came to me one day, and I said to him, when you were starting this company, I said, listen, you need any money? He said, no, Dad. I said, if you need any money, just ask me. I'll be happy to give it to you. He said, no, Dad, I'm not going to take any money from you because if the company fails, he said, I won't have any way of paying it back to you. Now, wow, I thought, boy, I thought about that a minute, you know. That never occurred to me as a kid. Somebody wanted to give me something, you know, I had both hands out, you know. But this kid's a thinker, you know. He's a thinker. He thinks before he does things. And came to me about 4 years ago. He said, Dad, what do you think I ought to do with this house, you know? You think I should buy it? I said, do you have the money? He said, I do. I said, I think you ought to buy the house, you know. So he bought the house, you know, and the house went up, you know, $300,000-$400,000 in a private community. And, you know, thank God, with very little help from me, you know. The fact that I've been sober a while has also been a good thing, you know, because I had a lot of good teachers. and they taught me well. And they showed me not so much by what they said, but what they did. They took actions, and they did things, and their lives started to change, And that's what I saw. My home group is the Pacific Group, and I've been a member of that group for almost 41 years. Next month I'll have 41 years of sobriety. And I don't tell you that because it impresses anybody, but I tell you one thing, it impresses the hell out of me, From whence I came to where I stand today, I mean, it's a long road, and, it just, and these kids are good, what I mean? They're respectful. I see kids today, I want to knock them out, you know what I mean? They talk back to their parents, I can't deal with that, I got a grandson, God bless you, back there, I got a grandson that's 2.5 years old, and I think this kid is one of us, He listens to nobody, absolutely nobody, I go to school to pick him up, he sees me, he runs right into the hall, The teacher says to him, hey, Brent, his name is Wyatt. Wyatt, come on back. He keeps going, We were at a pool party a couple of weeks ago at my daughter's house, and he's got the floats on, and he's got, the whole bit. And then I said to my son, watch him. I said, watch him. And he runs around the pool, and he saw the kids, the older kids, dive in the pool, in the deep water. He dove right in, you know what I mean? And he's not a thinker, He's like us, He's a doer, Whatever the hell he wants to do, I assure you he's going to do it, And I love that kid, man. I take a bullet for that kid, I love those kids, man, those grandkids. They're precious, Just precious, And to think I'd have missed it all, because of another drink or another fix or another pill. So, if you're new tonight, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. I saw some hands go up, and gentlemen sitting over here, and, you can't do this alone, man. You got to get a sponsor, You got to get somebody to show you how to do this, because it's not a self-help program. And I'm very grateful, that I met guys who came from my neighborhood in Brooklyn, like this guy Marv, He grew up in the same neighborhood I grew up in. I knew his younger brothers, both of them are dead today, But Marv's still around, and Marv knew exactly how I lived out there, And you got to get somebody to talk to, and I used to talk to Marv all the time. And when I was new and people did something to me, I always wanted to hurt them. I said, when that guy shows up at the meeting tonight, I'm going to take care of him, And my sponsor used to say to me things like, Paul, we don't have to live like that anymore. That's really unnecessary, And I found it hard to believe that, But I realized, that that's the way I used to live. If somebody did something to me, I'd grab a bat or something, whatever, and I would just hit them with it. I didn't think twice about doing that because that's the way I grew up, And then when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor told me, Paul, we don't live like that around here. We don't do things like that. I said, well, what do I do? He said, pray for the guy. I said, what? He said, pray for the guy. And then he told me what to do, and, I started to do it, and it took a long time. It took a long time for me to understand what he was saying. When I was new, I heard Chuck C. speak, a few times, and when that man talked, I had no idea what he was talking about, I had no idea. It took me over 30 years just to understand, what the hell he was talking about. And then I started reading his book, A New Pair of Glasses. And I identify with that book so much, I bought a dozen of them, And when I take guys through the steps, I say, here, read the book. I think I even gave one to Jimmy, I said, here, read the book when he was new, He's coming up on 9 years. And, when I first got him as a baby, I said, here, read this book, because he's come to the house, and we go through the book. And I said, listen, you might not understand it, but read it anyway, And I finally came to understand, what it was that he was talking about, And what is this program? It's all about love and service. You know, that's all we got. That's all we got. And so we try to pass it on to the new people or the old people or whoever's in trouble. You know what I mean? And we try not to turn our backs on anybody. It don't matter where they come from, what they look like, what they got, what they don't have. You know? But for the grace of God, there go I. You know? And I don't have to live that way today. You know? And I'm most grateful to be here tonight. I want to thank that guy who's not here tonight. Steve, you know, and it's all right, he missed a good talk. Thank you.